Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High-impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Mack Story.
Hello, and thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. So, got Ria back again. We're going to do more podcasts together this year. I'm sure you might already notice that we've started doing it a little bit toward the tail end of 25, and probably don't do more of it in 26. So, welcome back, Ria.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
So, I'm going to talk about something today, and Ria's going to help me out here, and it's not directed toward anybody specifically. A lot of times I know we talk to a lot of people, Ria, and a lot of people think they're the only ones we talk to. So whenever we're saying something, they always think it's meant for them.
Well, I touched on what this topic you're about to talk about. I touched on it in, I think, Ladder of Influence. And yeah, not really inspired by any specific person, but you and I do talk to and mentor a lot of people. And so I don't know about you, but I know a lot of times when I'm getting the same question from several different people, that's a sign to me that, hey, maybe other people could benefit from learning about this too. So it's always a good reflection that, hey, if a lot of people are asking some of the same questions, let's do some podcast on it.
Yep. And that's exactly the motivation for this one. I mean, there's quite a few people that I've been mentoring recently, and not just one, multiple people, but because we're speaking and always talking to people about personal growth, most of our one-on-one calls and mentoring people are growing, right? It's not, we don't talk to a lot of one-on-one repeatedly with leaders of organizations who want us to come in and speak and that sort of stuff. The one-on-one calls that we speak a lot of are people who are growing at different levels. They could be a leader, but we ain't talking about developing their people most of the time. We're talking about developing themselves. So a lot of people start reading, growing, thinking different. We raise their awareness. We provoke thought. And people, this is the one thing, Ria, that everybody who starts growing, especially new people that are new to growing, one of the things that always happens is they look out the window, which is fine, but you gotta get back in the mirror and do your work. But they look out the window and starts judging, how's my boss doing? How are my coworkers doing? But the boss is the number one person that most people look at work. They may look at their spouse at home, but they look at their boss at work, and then they start to have problems because they know the boss ain't doing all this stuff I'm learning that I'm supposed to be doing. My boss ain't doing it. And the thing is, the boss may never do it. And so a lot of the people that we speak to, they're growing, and then they start struggling with work. In the beginning, it's just an internal struggle. I'll be talking to folks and they're sharing thoughts about the boss and things that are going on at work or not going on at work, but it evolves into they got to do something about it. And a lot of them, what they do about it is they get frustrated about it. So then things start going south at work, and that's not a good place to be. So what we're going to talk about today is the three things three options you got, and you got a lot of options, and we'll break these options down into some sub options, if you want to call it that. But what are the three things, Ria, that somebody's got? What's three main options when they're maybe not happy at work? With a job or with the boss or with the company or with the type work they're doing. There's all kind of reasons you may not be happy. But when you're not happy with the boss specifically, what's three options we got?
Well, the three choices, right? The first one, you can quit. You can leave. You can find another job. You can, if you can't change your circumstances, you change your circumstances, right? That's certainly an option. And it's one a lot of people just naturally go to first. But if you don't want to quit for whatever reason, maybe you're vested in some retirement and you need a few more years, or maybe your geographical situation is such that you can't travel for work or whatever reason, right? For whatever reason, let's assume you're like, option number one is not an option. I don't want to quit, or I'm not going to quit. Okay. So then you've got two remaining choices. The first one, or the second choice of the three, but is that you can choose to stay there in that job where you're not happy with the boss or not happy with your situation or your coworkers. And you can be reactive, meaning you can stay there, but you can blame everyone and everything and be reactive to those emotions. And ultimately, to me, this is the worst choice of the three that we're talking about today, because this is the one that's going to long-term cost you your happiness, your joy, and it's going to cost you influence, because if you're being reactive and blaming everyone and everything, there's no way you can hide that. It's not, you can't keep it a secret, right? That's just going to ooze out from who you are. And so that's going to cost you influence. It could get you fired long term. It could be that if you're, choosing to stay there but choosing to blame and be reactive, they may at some point decide they don't want you on the team. So it could cost you future opportunities. It could cost you promotions. It could be that you're missing out on a job you would really, really enjoy, because it's kind of like when you're with the wrong person, you might be missing out on the right person. And the third choice is, if you're deciding to stay there, then you can choose to be proactive. You can choose to say, hey, it's not a great situation, and maybe that person is not a great boss, but I'm choosing to stay here, so I'm not going to let it bother me. It's like taking responsibility and saying, hey, I'm choosing to stay here for whatever reason, so now I'm going to choose to be proactive and positive about it.
Yeah, and that's the one we usually start out trying to help support people, kind of, because they're already working there. And until they started growing, most of them were okay with working there. But they start growing, and then they got an issue now with the boss, because the boss ain't growing. Now I'm learning stuff about what the boss is doing wrong, and then I learn something. I read some more, and I learn more about what the boss is doing wrong, and then what normally happens, and it's not everybody, but it's a recurring theme. I mean, I've been doing this since 2012, and even before then, I was doing it while I was doing my lean manufacturing. But since 2012, I've been doing this full time, and so we in 26, Ria. That's 14 years. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of people one-on-one, and I see the same thing. That's why we're doing this podcast today. The first thing they start doing, usually, first I get some calls. They're growing, what to read. They want to talk about what they've been reading. They want to look in the mirror and talk about, how they're seeing things. But usually it doesn't take long, and the conversation shifts. Then they call or they text, and they blaming the boss. And they don't, and they focused on the boss, and they don't realize that very thought of blaming the boss, it's just a signal for me they ain't done enough growing yet. Because the only reason they working there is because they working there. Ain't got nothing to do with the boss. And the boss is the same boss they were 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago or 2 years ago. If they're not growing, they're still the same. So what I always want to do is try to take people to that third option. So we'll kind of work backwards, because usually they're actually at the third choice, because usually they're at the second choice, right? They're working there and they're miserable,
right?
Or they're working there and they're frustrated, or they're mad, or they're irritated. That's usually what happens when people start growing. It's just I don't know why, but that's where people go. Even though I warn them, even though I talk to them about it and tell them the downsides of it before it happens, and then it still happens. And so, go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to say that quote of Myron Golden's, and just correct me if I don't get it right, but blame happens victimhood happens when we allow contributing circumstances to become defining factors, right? Meaning things that are external that might influence us. We transform ourselves mentally into the victim when we allow those to define us. And we don't have to, but here's the thing. It's easy to blame other people, right? It's hard to take responsibility for ownership of myself, my choices, my emotions, my reactions, because it's easy to just blame someone else. If I blame someone else, it's their fault. I don't have to fix it. And it's easy, right? Again, it's easy to be the victim, and it feels good, right? It makes us feel good to blame somebody else. We don't have to take ownership.
It don't make you look good, though.
It doesn't. And ultimately, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot, right? Because we are the ones who are in control of our life. And just sitting there choosing to be miserable and blaming other people is not moving us forward in a direction that anyone wants to go in.
Yep. A lot of people I see kind of touching on that, and I'll share another quote from Myron Golden that fits right there. And I thought you were going to say this one, but the one you said was perfect, because as soon as people start growing and then they start blaming the boss for being a bad boss and not doing this and not doing that, all this sort of stuff, they're choosing victimhood in that
Mm.
moment. They're also doing what Myron says. I love this quote from him. He says, blame is the most popular excuse. And as soon as I start blaming the boss, see, now I got to blame. If I just quit, I ain't got to blame the boss. If I just stay there and become proactive and understand the boss ain't growing, okay, what's that got to do with me? I'm growing. I'm going to be positive. I can do either one of those things, but most people choose for a while, at least, to stay right there in choice number 2, where I'm going to stay here and I'm going to be miserable. And then they shoot themselves in the foot because there becomes this friction between them and the boss.
Mm-hmm.
And then they start bad mouthing the boss because they haven't grown enough. And it's obvious when they start blaming, they hadn't grown enough. They need to be working on the mirror. Quit worrying about the boss, because if you blaming the boss, you ain't grown enough yourself, and you got just
Right.
many problems as the boss has got. And you're reading this stuff, and you're choosing to blame the boss. So in a way, you're in a worse situation than the boss, because the boss ain't learning this stuff. If you are learning this stuff and then you're doing the opposite of it, you ain't learning this stuff. You're learning about this stuff. And so a lot of times, somebody with that mindset, when they start learning this stuff and they start blaming the boss, something else they do is they start talking to their coworkers about the boss.
Yep.
Or they start talking to the boss about the coworkers, or all kind of different things like that. But that's somebody who needs character work on the inside. They need to quit worrying about the boss, go pull out the mirror and get back to work on themselves. Because until they can go to work in a place where the boss ain't growing and be positive, they got a lot of work to do. And so if they're going to leave, they need to leave on a positive note. But still, what I see most people do is they go get frustrated. They blame the boss. They start talking about the boss. They start talking about other coworkers. They start talking about the boss's boss. They start talking about the big dog all the way up at the top, all that kind of stuff. And then they become frustrated. And then they finally leave, and they leave it on bad terms. And most often what they're going to find at the next place is the exact same thing. Somebody who ain't growing, somebody who ain't going. And so they're going to go there and they're going to have the same exact frustrations, because the frustrations are really in the mirror, not out the window.
Mm.
So that's the number one thing for me to say is anybody who can be humble enough to look in the mirror and self-identify that, yeah, I'm growing, I'm learning, but I'm also doing the negative stuff. I'm looking out the window and blaming other folks instead of looking in the mirror and taking responsibility for myself. Because you can stay just positive as you want, and while you being positive, you can be filling out application. Right?
You know, it's kind of the essence of being proactive, right? Is not just looking around at the situation and saying, okay, I can choose to be proactive while I'm here. But part of the lesson is, what piece of ownership do I need to take in how I got here, right? Maybe you have a terrible boss. You didn't make that boss be a terrible boss, but you chose to go work for that terrible boss. So maybe the reflection is, what do I need to do differently in the interview next time so I don't end up working for another terrible boss, right? And I'm not saying that that's something you can always pick up in an interview, but when you're going for a job interview, a lot of times people don't think about the boss is interviewing you or HR is interviewing you. You should be doing just as much or more of the interviewing, right? Do I want to go work for this organization? Do they have the leadership and the qualities of leadership that I want to be following? And that's an important question. And the thing is that if we're growing ourselves, it's going to be easier to spot any of those red flags before we get to the accepting the contract or accepting the offer, right? So that's one reason we do have to be intentional about growing who we are. So we raise our level of awareness. We can see things earlier. We can spot those signs and symptoms that are either good indicators or bad.
That's right. Talking about being, going in through an interview, interviewing the people who are interviewing you. That's definitely something someone needs to do, especially if they're growing. Ask them, what book are you reading? What's the last book you're reading? What kind of leadership development do you guys have for the managers in this organization? What kind do you have for the people doing the work? And a lot of times they're going to say nothing, because that's what they got. Nothing.
That's the majority of it. What's out there.
If you growing and developing yourself and you go into work somewhere that's doing no leadership development, you can expect pretty much what you got at the last place, because that's the kind of people that they attract, and the kind of people that they retain are people who are not interested in growing, because if they're growing, they're going to come and go. And so that may be what happens to you. You can go there if you want, but you're probably going to leave if they're not doing any development and you actually keep doing development. But I got another warning for those folks who are blaming and frustrated at work when they start learning and growing, and they, instead of looking in the mirror, they're looking out the window. A lot of those people, Ria, they're going to go to the interview and they're going to badmouth the place that they're trying to get away from. They're going to badmouth the boss, and they're going to say, I've been growing, I've been reading, and, my boss ain't doing this, my boss ain't doing that. So what they're doing is training the new people, the people who are just now interviewing them. They're training them that, hey, I'm a kind of person going to talk about you behind your back. You can tell because I'm doing it right now to my current boss.
Right. I think that's an important question to prepare for, because they're going to ask, right? I have asked it in so many times interviews when I'm interviewing people. Why are you leaving your current job? Right. So prepare for that on the front end. Think of a proactive way to say it. You don't want to throw them under the bus. You don't want to lie either. But it's worth preparing for that question and thinking about a good, again, answering with integrity, but not throwing somebody under the bus, and just, take responsibility for, hey, it's time for me to grow to a new situation, or, just whatever that answer is. Again, being truthful, but not bad mouthing or blaming, because that's going to be a red flag to somebody else, is how you answer that question.
How you doing it? How you sounding? What you feeling like, right? Because if I'm leaving because I'm growing and my boss is not, I'm absolutely going to say that, but I'm not going to say it in a negative way. That's their choice. I'd say that's my boss's choice. That they're not interested in growing. Our company is not interested in leadership development. That's okay. While I'm there, I'm killing it, but that's got to be the truth. It can't be that I'm slacking and I'm miserable and I'm mad. It's got to be the truth. So you got to be living that way. So I always say, whenever you quit without quitting, is what I got I got a podcast on that. But what I mean by that is be proactive. Let's talk about that a minute, Ria. You talked about the first choice was quit, right?
Right.
You can quit. You can stay and be reactive and miserable, or you can stay and be proactive and happy, or go back to that first choice, quit. But you can quit reactively and you quit proactively. Let's talk about that a little.
Right. So let's say you do decide to stay. I always like to say, if you're not able to be 100% committed to the team, it's time to find a different team, right? If you're not in a position where you can stay there and be proactive, if you're just going to, be reactive and be blaming and be vocal about that and your unhappiness, it's time to find another team, right? It would be like a football game where all of the players aren't committed to getting out there and playing as hard as they can. If you're not able to contribute 100% to the team, you need to find another team, honestly, Ria, because yes.
Ria, how would it make sense if I was on a football team, if I run around, holler at the coach, hey, coach, I want to stay on the bench. Put me on the bench, coach. I don't want to progress. I don't want to become a starter. I don't want to become second, third string. Just leave me on the bench. And that's what somebody at work moaning and groaning about whatever it is they don't like. They're running around with their hand up saying, put me on the bench, coach. I really don't want to play. Why would you ever do that? What Ria just described, when you're that person at work because you don't want to be there, that's why what she just said is so true. If you're going to be on the team, while you're on the team, you got to be a starter. You got to be an MVP. You got to be the most valuable player on the team while you're on the team. You can smile, you can be proactive, and you can be filling out 100 applications a day. But you don't walk in and be miserable and moaning, groaning, whining to the world, because all you're doing is killing your influence. Go ahead, Ria. You just got me fired up by that. So that's nothing but facts right there.
Well, it's just so true, right? And it's kind of using that same analogy. If you don't like where the coach is leading you, it's time to find a different coach. I just finished reading a book about Sydney McLaughlin. She won a couple of gold medals in the Olympics for running and hurdling, and she was talking about her journey. And she went to the 2016 Olympics in Rio, and she passed the quarterfinals, made it to the semifinals. And then, she was young. She had just turned 17, and just the pressure was so much. And she talks about that a lot in the book, but she just ultimately didn't have the character to keep going through those semifinals. And so she learned from that, though. But one of the things that she learned was that one of the coaches that she chose, she didn't she didn't like their coaching philosophy. She didn't agree with it. And so one of the things she realized was, I've got to find a different coach. And that's hard, right? Someone who'd invested in her and her success, and just making a radical shift and finding a totally different coach. But if you don't like where the leader is leading you and you're not following with your whole heart, it's time to find a different leader.
Yep. And if you want to go work somewhere else, while you're there, you still need to be trying to follow with your heart. Like Ria says, you get, the sports analogy is pretty good. Like if you think about any pro team, let's say I really don't like my pro team I'm on whatever, baseball, football, basketball, doesn't make any difference. I'm on a team and I don't like the team. I don't like the coach. Guess what I need to be while I'm on the team to have the best chance to get selected by another team? I gotta be a superstar on my team.
Sure.
I can't be on the bench. I can't be on the bench wanting to be a starter on somebody else's team. And soon as you don't perform well because you don't like the boss, or you don't like whatever it is you don't like, if you choose not to perform well, you're shooting yourself in the foot. If you choose to badmouth the people around you, whether it's your boss, your coworkers, or anybody, support teams, engineering, lean, safety, quality people, it doesn't make any difference. And it goes back to what I talk about in the Frontlines book, Ria. You always got to understand we're working for ourselves. This the brand right here. I'm trying to build my brand. So if I'm in an organization where I don't, and again, I'm going to focus on the boss, because that's the number one thing people that I hear, they don't like the boss. So they don't perform well. They have a bad attitude, all kind of things negative that they have because they don't like the boss. And all it's doing is hurting themselves. What they got to do is, I don't like the boss. Okay, I'm still going to over deliver. I'm still going to do things better than expected. I'm going to do more than expected, because that's who I am. And if I'm reporting to you, Ria, and I don't like you, I'm gonna fire you and go find me a new boss. But I ain't gonna quit on me because I don't like you. I'm gonna keep performing well for me.
Well, that's one of the things that you have to, as a value-driven individual, right? That says a lot about your character, is how do we respond in the face of adversity? I was just reading a book. His name is escaping me. He gave the commencement speech at Texas several years ago, and the first thing was like, if you want to change the world, make your bed, right? And then he had several other
Navy SEAL admiral or something. I think.
Yep,
I forget his name.
McRaven. I may not have.
That sounds familiar. Yeah.
I may not have the name. Just it's just escaping me right now. But what he talked. One of the lessons in there. One of the things he talked about in the speech was get over being the sugar cookie. And that term comes from, during SEAL training, they make them get in the water and swim, and then come back on the beach and just roll in the sand until they're completely coated, and it's miserable. And then they have to keep on doing drills and training like that. But he was like, just get over it, right? Life is going to be uncomfortable at times. Sometimes you're going to have to do things that aren't fun or enjoyable. But how you respond to that is what says a lot about your character. Are you willing to just get over it and say, okay, push through, because it might be uncomfortable, but how I respond is going to determine my options and opportunities and influence in life.
Yep. You're 100% right. And, I think back to boot camp, talking about following bad leaders. I mean, we go in there, and from the minute we get there, I mean, it's nothing like what I see in the civilian world. Sometimes you got little bits and pieces, but these drill instructors yelling at us all day. I mean, sometimes, Ria, I've been in where there's one in front of my face, there's one in each ear, and they're like this close. And they're just yelling and screaming at me that I'm an idiot and all this kind of stuff. I had never seen that happen. I've been around all kind of terrible bosses from 1988 to 2008, when I actually worked and had a boss inside of a company. I ain't never seen anything like that, where three bosses come in there and they just yell at you like you're stupid. No, I ain't seen that. I've seen, bosses get mad and raise their voice and pound their fists and do all that stupid, silly stuff that weak leaders, insecure leaders with low character do. I've seen that. But what I'm talking about is all day, every day, pretty much at boot camp, the way it was. Yeah. But it prepared those of us who went through something like that. And I'm talking about Marine boot camp at Parris Island. And then it was actually worse at infantry school when I got to Camp Geiger outside of Camp Lejeune. It was actually worse up there. And but it allows you to do this stuff we're talking about. I mean, we still had to perform. And I graduated, I ain't ever read any of this stuff, but I got meritorious promotion out of boot camp because that stuff didn't bother me. I wasn't going to let it bother me. Before I went in, I already knew they were going to do it. It's the same way at work. If you got a bad boss, guess what? They are. They're a bad boss. They're going to do the stuff that bad bosses do. Okay, what's that got to do with you? That's always what I say. You go in, you over deliver, you outperform everybody else, and you smile and you deal with the bad boss. What you'll find out though is that boss probably actually start liking you, and then everybody gonna start talking about you and the bad boss because you're gonna have a good relationship with the boss, which is the whole problem anyway. Because a lot of people, they resent the boss because the boss wants credit. A bad boss, they want credit. They don't want to give somebody credit. They don't want to help somebody. They don't want to develop them because they're competing with them. But if you're leading yourself well, none of that stuff matters because at any moment you can walk out the door if you prepared yourself. So let's talk about, though, Ria was talking about quit proactively and quit reactively. Reactive is you blaming the boss, you mad at the boss, you do all that, you fed up with it. Finally, you just quit. A lot of people, I've had people do this that I've been coaching and mentoring because they don't listen and they do what they get frustrated and they walk out the door. Then they don't even have a job. And now, not only are they ain't miserable at work, but now they're miserable at life. And now they're causing their family problems. If they got a spouse and children, now they have no income. And I mean, that's the ultimate way to quit reactively. So what's the proactive way to quit, Ria? Some tips. We got a few more minutes before we wrap up this episode.
One of the things I always try to do is, and even when you're working out a notice and you're ready to go, and maybe it was a bad boss or maybe it wasn't a great situation, right? But be 100% there. Don't quit emotionally while you're still there physically. I worked just as hard or harder on the last day because it mattered, right? It mattered how I left that organization. And I remember, especially the one particular job, I was leaving, this is years ago, but I was leaving Outback, and I just finally come to the point where I wasn't going to wait tables there anymore because I had so many other things going on. And it was a slow shift, and I'm just really counting down the minutes at that point. But I remember thinking, you know what, I can just sit here and drag on, or I can find something to do. And so I went to the shift leader and I was like, give me something to do. And, let me scrub the walls. If nothing else, like, the place always can be clean. Right. And it was shocking. They were like, what? Like, you're about to leave. This is your last day, your last shift. We're down to the last 2 hours. And I'm like, I'm here and you're paying me. I might as well be useful, right? I can still be contributing to the mission. And again, that it's one of those things, it's a little thing, but it's a big thing, because I guarantee I never did ask that shift leader for a reference, but I guarantee you if I did, that last day made an impression, right? And that would have affected my word of mouth advertising if I had needed a reference.
Yeah, if you don't think you could ask for a reference, and if they were willing to do it, they would give you a good reference, that means you ain't quitting proactively.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember leaving the company several times. I left and I'd work late. I was over delivering on my way out. That's what the podcast where I talk about don't quit just because you're quitting. And what I mean there is show your true character. Over deliver on the way out. I mean, I worked a lot of extra hours. I remember one job in particular where I quit, and we were always behind. There was two of us that did the job. When I quit for a little while, there was going to be only one of us, my partner. And I thought of a lot of that guy, and I did a lot of overtime during my 2 weeks to actually get us caught up. And so it wasn't really getting us caught up because I was leaving. I was helping get him caught up so he'd have a little cushion because he was about to get behind. But that's what I encourage everyone to do. And if you can't do these things that we're talking about proactively, you got a lot of work to do. That's why I say quit worrying about the boss. Get to work on that mirror, because when you can lead yourself well, you can work in any condition. And you will also develop yourself so that you got options so that you don't have to work in that condition. But if you are working in a bad condition, you know that I'm walking in here every day. I'm responsible. I can't blame my boss because I showed up this morning. I got to report to them again. I got to look in the mirror and blame me. And if I don't want to work for that boss because I really don't like that boss, maybe I got to turn the TV off. Maybe I got to start reading some books. Maybe I got to figure out how to enroll in some kind of course, whether it's college or a certification or something. I got to learn. I got to learn, get myself set up. And it may be that I got to move from one city to another to get a different job. Some people don't want to do that. So then they don't want to move a job they don't want to move at all. They're just comfortable. So they get mad at the boss because I got to move because I don't like working here. I just want to try to fix my boss so I don't have to move. Boss don't want to change. All right, Ria. I think we had some good nuggets here. I don't know what somebody might get out of it, but if they can just stop blaming the boss, look in the mirror, go check out my book, Blue Collar Leadership, Leading from the Front Lines. That book is filled with principles that if you apply them, you can follow a bad boss well, or you can follow a good boss well, and either one of them will be glad to have you on their team. If you don't like being on their team, quit proactively. Find you a new team. Anything else, Ria?
No, I think you covered it pretty good.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mack Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mack's books, programs, special offers, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.